President Johnson, shall we?
Yes, please.
So we're on third base here, part 3. Trustees, you know that the Ann Arbor Public Schools has long been known for our business and strategic partnerships and for our amazing volunteer. It's a volunteer army that we mobilize into our schools. And I remember back in August receiving email about how we would manage class and school volunteers. And so, Miss Nancy Shore and Miss Jenna Bacalor were already on that. And I want you to know we've not lost a beat on the classroom volunteers. Now, we've recently shared out some of this information and some folks saying, well, you're using volunteers to do the work of the school district. I do want to emphasize that the kind of work that our volunteers are doing now mirrors perfectly the kind of work that volunteers were doing in a face-to-face environment. They're simply logging on virtually to support children in classrooms and in schools and to support teachers. And so Ms. Bacalor and Ms. Shore, walk us through how you've innovated and evolved the program so that we're still able to mobilize community members in support of our children.
Good evening, trustees and Dr. Swift. I am so excited that Nancy is here. This is her first time presenting to the board, and she's truly an unsung hero who works tirelessly behind the scenes to make these connections happen. As Samantha and Che and others have mentioned, we're so fortunate to live in a community where we have these strong partners who want to support our students and our teachers. We've had some of these partnerships for a long time. And of course, it's important for us to make sure that the volunteers are as successful as possible, that they're actually helping our students, right? So when Nancy arrived about 2.5 years ago to AAPS, she underwent a lengthy detailed program assessment and improvement process for the volunteer program. And so the overarching thing I want you to know is that she's been successful in much more tightly connecting our district goals and priorities to what the volunteers are actually doing in the classroom. So she's worked with teachers and principals and intervention specialists and curriculum coordinators and others to determine our needs, right? And then what she's done is strengthen our existing partnerships and build more so that we are doing that better match. She's also created a new orientation and training program, which we never had before, for our volunteers, again, based on district goals, and also explaining how do we do things in AAPS? How are we maybe different even from the college kids, their own education in elementary school? What we're doing might look very different even for them. And along the way, she's also just dragged this program right into the 21st century, moving it from a paper-based program to a tech-forward program. So anyway, I feel like we should do a big clap in for Nancy for her first board presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to her now. And I'm also here available for any questions or comments as well.
Thank you so much, Jenna. If I can get the slides up so I can go along, that'd be great. Thank you so much. Well, I am so delighted, as Jenna said, to be here. I have a wonderful job and the privilege of being able to staff the Strategic Partnerships Office. And just as a broad 30,000-foot view, we're really just the bridge builders. So we are here to be the bridge between our business, community, and educational partners and our schools. And we're doing it in a strategic way. So we are mapping what needs we have in our district and how our different resources can have the most impact on our schools. So we have many resources that we have from our partnerships, and one of those resources is volunteers. And so we actually checked in with administrators and teachers back in May, and we said to them, hey, if we have a virtual learning environment in the fall, do you still want to have volunteers? And unequivocally, they said, yes, we do. So we wanted to make sure that we could have a volunteer program happen to support our teachers in our schools. So luckily, we had built a really strong foundation in terms of best practices for onboarding volunteers, ensuring that they would be effective in the roles that they were playing. And we really just adapted that model to the virtual learning space. And in addition to doing that, we also made sure that we had a program that was really going to fit the needs of our schools and had a few less volunteers than we did the previous year. And we'll share some statistics in a little bit. If you want to learn more about our program, you can just go to a2schools.org/volunteer and learn more. So what was our strategy for this fall? It's relatively similar to the strategy that we often use. But one of the first things we really wanted to do is we wanted to drill down and make sure that we had clear priorities for the types of volunteers that we wanted to welcome in the fall. And we wanted to map those and align them with the Reimagine Learning Plan so that we were in concert with what was already happening. So we looked at social, emotional, and academic support as the main priorities for volunteers for this fall. We also really wanted to focus on those students that we know had already been facing barriers to achievement and may also be in the virtual learning space. And so that included the English language learner students or ELL students, as well as students who were in schools with high free and reduced lunch population. We looked at marrying both of those different priorities and population so that we could place the volunteers into our schools. And we did this in the same way that we normally do. We onboarded them, made sure that they had their background checks, they had a great orientation. And then we looked at which schools really had the interest based on those priorities and population, and then brought those volunteers into the schools in a virtual setting by matching them with those teachers. And then after that, it's really just a warm handoff. And we have teachers get the license and the liberty to be able to use volunteers as best fits their classroom, because we know every classroom is a little bit different. And then finally, it's not just about numbers, it's not just about process, but it really is about the impact that these volunteers have. As Dr. Swift mentioned, we know from research that the best way to use a volunteer is in a supplemental fashion to support the instruction that the teacher is already providing. So that's the type of role that our volunteers have always had. They're supporting our teachers. They're making it easier for our teachers to do their great work. And I actually have a couple of quotes from teachers where we can share a little bit more about that. And then of course, we are always looking to improve. We are getting feedback from teachers, getting feedback from the volunteers so that we can make sure to improve our program and then continuing to find new partnerships that can help enhance our program. So what are some of those statistics for our volunteers? We had 304 volunteers that are frequent during the school year, during the school day this fall, and that is compared to 370 last fall. So we did see a little bit of a decline. Some of the successes that we're really proud of is we did find a way to have more volunteers in schools that were supporting students with academic support in schools that had higher free and reduced lunch populations. So a couple of really great examples of this are we already had an existing partnership with an organization called 826 Michigan. They do writing workshops and they normally had done in-person tutoring at their locations. And they pivoted and they had this great schoolwork support program. And we were able to match them with Carpenter Elementary where they're doing that program during asynchronous time on Wednesdays. And I actually have a quote from the teacher that we worked with on that to share later. We also expanded our partnership with the Michigan Community Scholars Program. So these are freshmen at the University of Michigan that are doing service learning programs. And we were able to expand our partnership with them at Scarlett Middle School to bring more volunteers to that school to serve more of their teachers. And then finally, we have a great partnership with the America Reads program. It's a work study program at University of Michigan that trains University of Michigan students in literacy support, and they do it in Detroit, in Ypsilanti, as well as Ann Arbor. And we really wanted to focus on having America Reads volunteers working in some of our Title I schools. And so for the first time, we were able to bring that program to Pittsfield and Allen Elementary. And we also have them at several other schools in our district. Another statistic that I'm really proud of, and I know Trustee Beskett did talk about this a little bit, we did have a lot of interest from our English language teachers in bringing in more volunteers to support English language learners in our schools. And so we were able to increase the number of volunteers we have that were bilingual, that are supporting those students. Supporting those students. And those volunteers are in courses at the University of Michigan. They're individual University of Michigan students that are working with our English language students. And so again, just emphasizing what others have said, we have such a wonderful asset in the University of Michigan. We have so many great partnerships, and a lot of those partnerships do revolve around volunteer support. And the students that we get have so many great skills to offer. And I will share, there'll be a quote later that'll show you kind of that great unique role that they play. So talking a little bit about some of the statistics around where we place volunteers. So again, one of our goals was really to focus those volunteer resources on some of our schools with higher free reduced lunch populations. And we're really happy to be able to do that. And just want to touch on briefly pathways. Mr. McCoo was here earlier. We have a great partnership with a program called Wolverine Tutors, which are U of M students that are working with them. And so we have a great program with Pathways. And then Samantha Cuckoo, as she mentioned, she does have some volunteers that are helping out at Lakewood as well. So just touching on those.
Ms. Shore, before you leave,
of course.
Before you leave that, would you touch on with the trustees and the community? This, I've just kind of named it a differentiated deployment, kind of based on this higher need, those who need the most get the most. This is new this year, correct? Or have you always differentiated the deployment of volunteers?
So as Ms. Bacalor mentioned earlier, we did a little bit of an assessment of where our volunteers were placed when I first came on. And we found that it made a lot of sense that a lot of our University of Michigan partners tended to want to go to schools that were closer to the University of Michigan campus. That wasn't always the case, but we did look at that, and we, based on some of where we had seen those resources, we did make some adjustments to make it more equitable and to ensure that we were spreading around those resources. So we did do a little bit of change up with that this year, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So this slide just really talks about how we looked at those type of volunteers, again, really emphasizing the academic and social emotional support. We had a wonderful asset in the number of volunteers that we had in that space. The literacy support, so this is our Great America Reads program. They actually had a paired model. They have a paired model for how they do their volunteering. So we have a great number of volunteers in that space. And then finally, the EL volunteers that were supporting our students that speak English as a second language. So again, I want to not just say this myself, but I want to have some of our teachers be able to share with you what they're experiencing. So Jen Duman, she is at Pittsfield, and she has been taking volunteers from University of Michigan for many years now, and she has America Reads students this year. And she's really highlighting the unique role that our University of Michigan students play in the classroom. They get to be that great middle space. So they're not teachers, they're not kids, they're this wonderful, cool role model for the kids that they're working with. Robin Birdsong, so she was really the mover behind this 826 Michigan partnership that we were able to have, and she's really appreciating that she has all of these volunteers that can really help her connect to her students even better. And then we also have Trish Hayes. So she is the EL teacher at Slauson and Forsyth, and being able to find that bilingual volunteer that could then be paired with her students to help support them, to make them more successful academically, has been really positive as well. And then these are two quotes from Scarlett Middle School. So this is where we expanded our partnership with the Michigan Community Scholars Program. And one of the things that Ms. Kent here from the mathematics teacher at Scarlett really emphasizes is the idea that having these volunteers frees up her time. So it makes it easier for her because she has somebody who's in a breakout with other students. And so she's able to do some of her work more effectively. And that is really talking about that supportive supplemental role that our volunteers play. And then Munir Khalid, he has been amazing. So he actually is a graduate of the Michigan Community Scholars Program. So he had a great in, and he had been having those students in his classroom and was really instrumental in expanding that partnership and bringing in even more U of M students into Scarlett this coming year. And he really speaks about the social emotional, the academic support that these volunteers provide, as well as having that role where they are really inspiring kids in terms of being able to think about college. So where are we at and where are we going to be going? So this semester, we have finished our placement process. So we do have a placement window, and we tend to finish placing all of our volunteers by October to give them a lot of time to be able to work with our schools. And right now we're going to be having those volunteers be deployed and do their good work. We're going to have an evaluation process. So we do this every year so that we can see how we can be more successful. We're going to monitor some of the ways that we've been doing the volunteering and see if there's some models that we can continue to develop and expand. And of course, always planning, continuously trying to improve the program and figuring out what we can do next. And then in this next semester, so coming up in January, we are going to have our natural turnover of some of those U of M students. We may be welcoming on some new partners that were able to join us in the fall. And we really do want to continue to focus on how can we bring in more of those English language learner volunteers, maybe do some more small group support volunteers. And then finally, always keeping to those best practices. How can we make sure that we are having the most effective volunteers possible? And so, we're really, really grateful to have this program. And so to wrap up this section of the presentation, I really want to thank all of our lovely staff for welcoming volunteers into our classrooms, into our virtual classrooms. So all of the administrators and the teachers and the intervention specialists and the EL teachers, you are so kind to steward and shepherd these volunteers, because just as Samantha Cuckoo said, the volunteers benefit and gain as much from that experience as our students do, which is wonderful. And I also want to thank all the volunteers that are taking their time. University of Michigan students are, as you can imagine, very stressed. So the fact that they are taking their time to also volunteer is wonderful. So I really want to thank them. And then, of course, all of our wonderful partners, both our community as well as our university partners, have been invaluable assets during this time and really do help us create this wonderful web of support for our students. So I'm going to do a little bit of a one pager on winter giving. I know Dr. Swift touched on this briefly at the last meeting, so I'm going to do that, and then happy to take questions. So again, another wonderful resource that we have from our community is supporting us and supporting our students with some of the things that they need to succeed that go beyond that instruction. We know that our schools are more than just places where kids learn. They get food, they get their basic needs met. And so we've been so overwhelmed with the level of support we have this year with our winter giving. We've already received enough support for 400 students, and we continue to get folks willing to donate gift cards to help us out. We do have a website that's up and running that Dr. Swift mentioned last time the board meeting was, and you can just go to h2schools.org/wintergiving, and you can still help out. We are certainly still accepting support. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer questions, or Ms. Bacalor can also assist.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy Shore.
Mm-hmm.